Jonathan Lee Riches investigates 4 college students stabbed in the middle of the night in a home in Moscow, Idaho. Case is still unsolved. The individual or individuals responsible are still on the loose. Police have made no arrests. Who did it? The town of Moscow actually had a tragedy decades ago that is still unsolved. An individual by the name of Janice Foiles. I'm going to read to you about the Janice Foiles case. You need to listen. Just check this out, listen, and then we will discuss. This is a newspaper article about an unsolved crime in Moscow, Idaho, from decades ago that is still unsolved. I will read it here. Janice Lynn Foiles, a crime of icy passion. Young Moscow waitress was bludgeoned to death with a hammer on a quiet winter's night. In the beginning, there were many theories, but all the cops' leaves have since grown cold. Above, the lock shop and headquarters hair salon are now in a space once occupied by the Tip Top Cafe in Moscow. The murder and waiter Janice Lynn Foiles on December 28, 1969, at a small town eatery is still unsolved. The Tip Top Cafe was a typical small town eatery in late 1969, with both sit-down and drive-in menus served by waitresses and car hops. And then, during the Sunday evening of December 28th, after all the customers had left, an 18-year-old waitress, Janice Lynn Foiles, was preparing to close, and yet to be explained, tragedy struck. Foiles, a Moscow high school graduate and freshman at the University of Idaho, was found bludgeoned to death behind the cafe counter. We believe this is an isolated incident, Moscow Police Sergeant Dave Williams told news media after the killing. It does not seem to be the work of a psychopath. 1 month later, Moscow Police Captain Robert Means was quoted in a news story as saying, "Our investigation has turned up several productive leads. We believe we are narrowing the field. This year will mark 45 years since Foiles died, and while the case is not closed, police still have no suspects and it remains inactive. Typically on any unsolved case, we don't close them," said Moscow Police Lieutenant James Fry, who oversees the department's detectives division. The Tip Top Cafe, located in what is now the Post Office Square shopping center at the corner of 3rd and Jefferson Streets, went out of business decades ago. In its place, the lock shop and headquarters hair salon continue to operate on opposite sides of the wall that divides what used to be the cafe. On that wall, a black and white photo of what the Tip Top Cafe once looks like hangs in the lock shop next to rows of uncut keys. "I think just behind this wall is where the counter would have been," Gary Crabtree, owner of the lock shop, said in 2008, "where the hairdresser is now." Crabtree recently said the shop's previous owner, Jeff Beckett, was the one who told him most of what he knows about the Foiles case. "Everything I know is at best third or fourth hand information, if not more so." Headquarters owner Tony Latham has worked at the salon in its current location for almost 9 years, and in that time, she has heard a few customers mention the case. It's not an everyday or even weekly occurrence, but it's stories she's heard several times over the years. Occasionally, some of our elderly clients will remember back to when it was the Tip Top, and they'll mention this case. Latham said that all she really knows about the case is the waitress was at the restaurant alone one night, something about a hammer, and the girl bludgeoned to death. Police say a claw hammer was most likely the murder weapon. Such a hammer, with one claw missing, was reportedly kept behind the cafe counter and used for small repairs. And that hammer came up missing and was never found, said former Moscow Police Chief Dan Weaver, who worked as a reserve for the department in 1969. So it was assumed by investigators that could have been the instrument used. The day of the murder had apparently been a slow one at Tip Top, with students home on holiday break and people getting ready to celebrate New Year's later in the week. Foiles, according to newspaper accounts at the time, was said to have been found clutching clutching the daily's receipts in her hand, a total of $17. Looking at the crime scene photos, Lieutenant Dave Lemetz said after reviewing the case file in 2008, it would appear that obviously robbery or some kind of sexual assault was not the motive. So then what would more than likely lead you to believe it was a crime of passion? Obviously, with the multiple blows too, there's some rage involved. Perhaps the work of a spurned boyfriend. There was ex-boyfriends who were interviewed, Lemetz said. There were other people developed who possibly had some type of motive, so there were numerous people that were interviewed on this case, but none rose to the level of suspect. If the killer was a peer, he or she would now be more than 60 years old. It makes you hope that maybe on their deathbed or something, they'll confess, said Weaver, who retired in 2010. Things like that have happened in the past. Foiles, who was born in Coeur d'Alene, spent 2 of her high school years in Boise and her last 2 at Moscow High School. Her picture is the Bear Track School yearbook, arranged alphabetically among her classmates and anointed with credit for being a member of the French and Pep clubs, as well as an active in American Field Service, the school's foreign exchange program. Janice had always been a quiet girl, never taking much part in school activities or dating. Her father, Marvin Foiles, was quoted as saying in a newspaper story almost 2 months after his daughter's death, she was just beginning to come out of her shell and have fun in her life when this happened. Marvin Foiles and Randy Foiles, Janice's brothers, found her at Tip Top when she failed to come home on a Sunday night. They eventually went looking. Their discovery around 3:30 the next morning was at least 6 hours after the crime, according to police reports. Around 8:40 on the night of the murder, a Moscow police officer making routine rounds noticed the lights were still on at the Tip Top, according to press accounts at the time, but that wasn't unusual for closing time, and he didn't check. The lights were on, and they believed she was in the process of closing. Because it looked like it at least appeared she was counting the till out. Crabtree said police over the years would come into his lock shop to look at the old picture and ask a few questions. He was told once that every time a new detective was hired, they'd be asked to look into some unsolved cases, but it hasn't been a long time since that's happened, he said, adding he doesn't think much more will come of the case. A similar sentiment was expressed by Marvin Foiles, who is now deceased at the time of his daughter's death. I don't suppose we'll ever get over it. Janice Foiles' mother, Karma Foiles, all but confirmed her late husband's prediction when asked about it in 2008. She did not provide further comment at the time, saying she and other families have tried to move on. As for the investigation, police say Janice Foiles' murder has never been and never will be permanently shelved until and if it's solved. All our cold cases have been looked at by other agencies, including state and federal, said Lemetz. Since 2008, this one as well. More than 15 years ago, police opened the case by publicly disclosing the murder weapon may have been a claw hammer. And of course, people were bringing in claw hammers from all over the place. None proved to be the missing and suspected hammer. There haven't been any new ones brought into police in quite some time either. If someone brought one in, we would still look at it and still test it. If the truth to be known, Lemetz says police know more about the case than they're willing to disclose. For example, he said the crime scene hasn't been really described. That's a piece you hold back in case a person wants to confess. You want to be able to corroborate their confession with what was at the scene. In Fry's mind, there would be nothing better than being able to close out this case and others like it to provide the family with some answers and bring someone to justice. He said police would love it if someone with information who was maybe too scared to come to them at the time would come in now. A lot of these cases, that's what it comes down to. You got to get that one tip that gives you information to follow up on, he said. Very interesting article. Unsolved murder in Moscow, Idaho from 1969. Hair salon. The victim's name was Janice Lynn Foiles. Foiles. So in 1969, right after Christmas, a woman somebody used a hammer. Sad situation. Still, That case is unsolved. What a lot of people are worried about is this case now with the stabbings of these 4 innocent victims, college students. Will this case go unsolved? Looks like police are working around the clock with other teams of investigators like the FBI to solve this case. But let's pray it doesn't go cold like Janice's case. And just keep mindful, be mindful. The individual that possibly did Janice's case, the police said could be in their 60s. Hopefully this is not related in any way. Do you think this case is related to Janice's case? Is there a local person there on the loose doing crimes, victimizing people that police are not aware of at this time as far as identifying who is responsible? Or with this particular case, 4 victims, was it someone they knew, someone they let in their house, someone close to them? What's going on in Moscow, Idaho? A lot of speculation, a lot of unknown, a lot of fear, a lot of panicking, a lot of anxiety, uncertainty. Let's pray that authorities solve these cases in Moscow, Idaho. Subscribe to my channel, hit the notification button. I cover true crime. I got a lot of back history of individuals with this case, the Moscow case, and I'm just digging in at other unsolved cold cases in the Moscow area, seeing if there's any connection whatsoever. God bless. Everyone be safe.